logistics. So make sure to ask questions in the chat. There are a lot of you, so if we don't get to you right away, just know that hopefully sometime during the event we'll get back to you, or feel free to follow up with any of us afterwards. Yeah, be respectful and supportive of others in the chat or in this event, and also make sure to sign up for Leland. So if you guys didn't get that QR code, you can just go to joinleland.com. So a quick overview of what the next hour or so will look like. I will introduce myself, and the other panelists will give you guys a brief overview of the Leland platform and different product offerings. We'll go over a quick recap of the college application, and then we'll move on to the main event, which is our expert panel. So I'll start us off, and then I'll pass it along to Hillary. But my name is Emma. I'm a current undergrad at Stanford, and I also worked at Leland last year. And so I went through this process myself 3 years ago, have helped a few clients through it, my siblings, and applied to over 20 colleges myself. So definitely something that I've spent a lot of time thinking about. So I'll pass it on to Hillary.
Hi, so nice to meet everybody. My name is Hillary, and I have been working with students and families in this process for more than 15 years in a variety of settings. I've worked in high schools in New York City and also internationally, working with international families from basically from every country in the world who are interested in applying to US universities. And in the last couple of years, I've wrapped up my time on the school side of things, and now I'm just working with students and families directly. So I've worked with over 600 families directly in this process in the last 15 years. And I think, just my approach is, my background originally is in mental health and counseling. And then through working with students, in the high school setting, I've just become really enamored with the opportunities in this process to help students get to know each other as they explore their paths towards their futures. So thanks for having me.
Hi, y'all. My name is Mel Baxter. I have worked in admissions and visitor experience for almost 10 years. I'm about to celebrate my 10-year anniversary here in a couple of months. Throughout my professional career, I've had the chance to work at Stanford University, the University of Texas at Austin, and most recently, New York University. Throughout those experiences, and especially at UT Austin, I had the chance to work with prospective students and read applications and better understand how the admissions process works. I've had the chance to work with hundreds of students and support them in their college process. And then on top of that, I have always supervised the student ambassadors at the universities that I've worked for. And so I've gotten to support those students as they've applied for graduate schools as well. Really excited to be here. Thank y'all so much for being a part of this. And I will pass it over to Devery.
Thanks so much, Mel. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here this evening. I have also been in the admissions world in one way or another for about the last 15 years. I've worked on the college side, reading applications at Harvard, as well as at Berkeley, both undergraduate and their MBA programs. I have worked as a high school college counselor at a top independent school out here on the West Coast. And I've also dabbled a bit in tech and recruiting, so I actually know quite a bit about kind of what companies and colleges are looking for in terms of like computer science. So that was really helpful moving out here to the Bay. But over the years, I've worked with hundreds of students and families. I really focus on best fit colleges for students, really want them to be introspective in this process and think beyond the brand name and really think about what college is going to really help them thrive academically, personally, socially, and for their futures. And yeah, thanks so much.
Great. Well, as you guys can see, we truly have a wealth of experience and knowledge on this panel. So I'm really excited to get into it. And before we do, we'll have the Leland team give a quick set of intros.
Yeah, I can do a quick intro to represent our team. I'm Erica, head of experience here at Leland. Super excited to meet each of you. I work closely with our coaches and our customers to make sure each of you find the right coach to work with and feel supported by the Leland team. You'll also see John, our CEO here, and Dalen, who runs events at Leland. So thanks so much, everyone, and looking forward to hearing the amazing insight from our incredible panelists this evening. So thanks for being here, and thank you, panelists, for your time and expertise.
Thanks, Erica. So before we start, I'd love to get to learn a little bit about all of you guys. So if you wouldn't mind putting in the chat, where are you guys dialing in from? What year are you? And what is your dream school? Or feel free to just pick one. But yeah, we'd love to get some messages in the chat to kind of get a pulse on where everyone's coming from. Okay, awesome. Looks like we have folks coming from all over. So yeah, let's see, we'll get into it. So before we start on the content, I wanted to give everyone a little bit of context on the Leland platform. So Leland is a coaching marketplace designed to help you get closer to your goals. And so whether it's with one-on-one coaching with someone like one of our panelists, small group classes, events like this one, or Leland Plus, which is a new product offering related to content and resources curated to your goals, Leland is the one-stop shop that you can go to take the next big step in your education or your career. And the exciting thing is that it's working. Leland has helped hundreds of users land their dream roles, in whether that's a job or a school. And so here are some of the successes that customers have had through working on our platform. Stanford, Harvard, Michigan, UVA, BYU. Leland truly has coaches for whatever school or goal that you are aspiring towards, and coaches that can really meet you where you're at and understand your background. And one exciting thing about this event is that we're giving away $25 in free coaching credit to every attendee. So I'll touch on this once more at the end, but make sure to take note of this code, which expires at the end of November. And so anyways, to take the next step and to really reach out to one of our coaches. And so just to quickly go over the college application. I know you guys have all been thinking about it or you wouldn't be here, but just because we're going to dive right into some of these topics, I thought it might be helpful to kind of set the stage at a high level. The college application consists of telling schools about your academic merits, which primarily consist of your grades, what kind of coursework you took, your standardized test scores, your activities outside of school and the ways in which you've been recognized for that, how other people will vouch for your candidacy, primarily teachers through letters of rec. And then last but certainly not least, the essays where you're really going to tell your story. And I think that's what we're going to try to hit on, especially in this event, because I think that's where students can really stand out in the midst of a lot of applicants who maybe have grades and test scores that could be a fit for a certain school. Your essays are really where you can sort of stand out and differentiate yourself from the crowd. And so one more question that I'd love to see some answers in the chat is, what part of the process is most daunting for you guys? I know I listed off a lot of different things and there are a lot of different components, but yeah, maybe if a few of you guys could share what you're looking for help on or what you're a little bit more apprehensive about. Cool. And yeah, we'll definitely make sure to focus on these if we have time. And yeah, we'll definitely hit on a lot of these topics. Okay. So let's get right into it. So to kick us off, we'll have each of our three panelists answer this quickly. What is your best tip for applying to a top university and standing out in the midst of lots of qualified applications? Mel, we'll start with you for this one.
Absolutely. Thanks, Emma. I am very passionate about this question, especially after years of reading applications and working on the campus tour side of things. My biggest tip is to research the university before you apply. And what I mean by this is for you to understand, why is this your dream school? Why is this a place that you want to apply? How will you, once you are a student there, impact the student body, and use that as a way to share with the admissions committee of why you would be such a good fit and such a good addition to the university, and what can you add in your application to show all of the above as well. So in short, researching the school is my biggest tip.
Nice. If I could just add on to that, I agree entirely. Research is so important in understanding what the school has to offer, and what you are going to bring to that community is really important as well. I think my best tip for applying to any school, and just for beginning this process, is to first, before you even start to look at applications, and yes, you should be doing that, but first to engage in a process of reflection and start to identify what are the things about yourself that you really want to highlight in an application. And instead of kind of being reactive and looking at the application and deciding where, how to answer things, first decide who you are, what's meaningful to you, what what are the really important facets of your personality and your life experiences and your perspective and your values that you want to share. Know what all of that looks like, and then figure out how to weave that throughout your application. So it's like a step one and then a step two, and they can all fit together. But first, engage in some really nice reflective work.
Strong agree on both of those responses, to be sure. To add on to that, I would say start early. Actually check in with yourself earlier on, like 8th, 9th grade, if possible, to start asking yourself, what is important to you? Why are you doing the things that you're doing? What are your goals? Who are you, right? You have to actually check in with yourself, because if you are just doing things because you think that's what you're supposed to be doing, and there's no real, motivation behind it or purpose behind it, then when it comes time to actually start writing your applications, they're gonna fall flat, because you're not really excited about what you're doing. So doing your research, being reflective, and really starting earlier in this process are great ways to really set yourself up to have a less stressful process and a much more personal process.
For sure. And one thing I would just double click on there is, I think a lot of that research and self-reflection that happens during the admissions process is also important to ensure you're happy at the school that you end up at. I think that's one thing I underestimated, and I'm really lucky that I ended up loving Stanford. But I think when you're at college and you have friends that go to different ones, you realize that they really are so different, and there's so many of them. That's the awesome thing about US schools, and you can find one that aligns really well with your personal interests, and like what type of environment you want to be in, but it will take some work and research. And so I think that's a really good tip from the panelists, and something to start early on if you can. So the next question is around letters of recommendation. And from my experience personally and working with other high schoolers, I think one misconception is that, you're just going to ask a teacher and then they're going to write you a letter of rec, and that should be the end of the story. But I think, as probably all of you know, there's a lot of proactive steps you can take to really ensure that that letter of rec is going to fit in well with your the rest of your application. You give them a little bit more detail. And so maybe Hillary on this one, because I know you've worked at a high school before. What would you say to a student that's just starting to think about asking their teachers of letters of rec?
Sure. Okay. I love this one. So first, I'm just going to kind of backtrack. If there are anyone who's not yet in grade 12, so anyone who's in grade 9, 10, and 11 right now, and especially you grade 11 students, if there are any of you, it's the beginning of the school year, and now is the time to connect with your teachers to make sure that they know you, they understand you as a learner, talk to them like they're a real person, and really make an effort throughout this school year to make sure that they know you, they know the way that you learn, and they know how much you care about the subject. And so for my grade 12 current seniors in the room, hopefully you just heard what I said and you are thinking back on last year and you're feeling that, yes, you did those things. And even if, you didn't do them intentionally, perhaps there's still some time and ways that you can connect with your teachers. And typically you are going to ask teachers who taught you for that full year in grade 11. There can be some exceptions, but typically that's how we go. And you want to first of all, remember that you are asking them for their support in this process. And they might be, obligated to write for you as part of their responsibilities as your teacher, but you also want to make sure that they know that you appreciate their efforts in supporting you as you apply to college. I mean, this is such an incredible opportunity in your life. And to come back to Emma's point about being proactive, I actually, and a lot of high schools have this and do this, I actually have students complete what I like to call an academic reflection, which is to do some deep thinking about their experience in the classroom. Think about what you loved, what was visible to the teacher, what might not have been visible to the teacher. So share some examples with your teachers. And typically you can do this in writing, but you're also welcome to have a conversation with your teacher as well. Ask them about their process and what they would love to receive from you. But yes, definitely provide either through written format or through conversation. Talk to your teacher about, how the class possibly connects with something you would love to do in the future, how you feel that you contributed to the learning experience and the environment in the classroom. But you actually want to provide some proactive details about what it was like for you to be in that class and what you would hope for the teacher to be able to highlight. And sometimes students have a little bit of hesitation. They feel like, oh, am I asking the teacher to, am I writing on their behalf? And it's more the kind of reflection that a lot of, some schools ask students to do just as part of the learning process overall, to just actually think deeply about what the experience in that class was like, and then make sure that the teacher that you are requesting to support you in this process has access to that information in one way or another.
Awesome. And Devery, do you want to add anything else here?
So again, totally agree with everything that's been said. I guess I'll just add on in terms of who to ask. So, a lot of colleges they're gonna have different requirements, but when we're looking at probably the most selective, the majority of them are gonna ask you to submit 2 letters of recommendation from core academic subject areas. Some of them might even be a bit more specific and say, we want somebody from the humanities and somebody from STEM subjects, right? So you would just kind of follow those guidelines. I think asking a teacher from 11th grade, someone you've had for the whole year, somebody in one of those core subjects, is an excellent person to ask, especially if you've been participating, maybe were helpful, maybe you went in to ask for help, maybe talk to them about your favorite TV show because you have that in common, right? They are people. So all of those are great, but you can also ask teachers who maybe you've had twice, right? Maybe you had them in 9th grade and are going to have them again in 12th grade. That's a great, that's a person who can talk about your growth over time. Maybe they are your student council advisor and also your history teacher. Also great, right? These are people who can really, share what you're like in and outside of the classroom, how you've grown, etc. So great teachers to ask. You will also be asking your counselor for a letter of recommendation. And the more you know them, the more they can write. Otherwise, mostly what your counselor is going to do is, provide context, right? Provide academic context, how you compare to your peers, what they've heard about you from other teachers. So the more you can get to know them, maybe set up a couple of meetings before applications are due, the better that's going to set you up.
Yeah, for sure. And just one thing I'll add quickly is I think the depth of the relationship is important, because I went to a public high school. And so I remember our AP US history teacher in particular got like 80 requests for letters in a year. And so I think the two things like to hit on from that example is, one, a lot of times your teachers are going to be writing a lot of letters. And so anything you can do to make it easy for them, to give them like content to work with, and to emphasize how important this is to you, and maybe asking on the earlier side than other folks. Just all of those things are really important. And if you're on the younger side, like thinking about how can you go the extra mile to really develop those relationships with teachers and show up to office hours when maybe other people don't want to, because I think that does make a difference in the end. Okay. Awesome. And so I think we're going to transition a little bit into talking about essays. And so for those of you who haven't seen them, we just wanted to give a brief overview of what these essay prompts are for the Common App, which is sort of the application that is the most expansive in terms of coverage of different schools. And so as you guys can see, these are pretty varied in terms of what you can talk about. And there's even an option to go outside the prompts provided. So pretty open-ended in a lot of different directions that you could go for this one. And so with that said, and with the ambiguity that comes with that, I'm going to ask, and let's see, we'll start with Mel for this one. But how do you recommend choosing a topic or having that initial sense of direction when there is so much to choose from? And is there anything that you would recommend students to maybe stay away from, whether that's like topics or like how they approach this essay?
Yeah, I really love what Hillary was talking about earlier in terms of thinking about your experiences, thinking about who you are as a student and as a person, and then going into the prompt list and seeing, okay, how can I fit this into the prompts that are being presented to me? I would say if you're at the point where you're thinking, I'm a little stuck, or I still don't know where to start even with that, I would recommend utilizing the people around you and maybe ask some family members, some close friends, some teachers, something simple like, how would you describe me? What are a couple of adjectives you would use? And then to follow up with that and say, what are some of your favorite stories that maybe help support me, being that certain quality, or you describing me in that way? And maybe that can kind of help kind of jog your memory of some different stories or experiences that could fit in well for essays. In terms of certain topics to stay away from, when I was reading applications, I think the number one most popular essay that I read was about someone having a sports injury, specifically tearing an ACL. And there's nothing wrong with writing about that, but I will be totally straightforward in saying that if you do write about, something that might be a little bit more common, it is pretty possible that the admissions committee, and specifically your admissions counselor, that will not be the only essay on that specific topic that they'll read about that day. So really just making sure that you're differentiating yourself. What I would encourage you to do is, if you do want to talk about something like a sports injury, for example, think about what you learned from that and how that now makes you a better student for that institution as well. I will plug, I recently wrote a blog post about this on Leland's site about 4 tips to elevate your college essay, and talked a little bit more about kind of those different topics to avoid as well.
Yeah, no, that's a really important point on the uniqueness, because yeah, it's not that you couldn't use that topic and put a really interesting spin on it, but even when I think about just the folks that I've talked to at Stanford, and we'll get into this, I think, with the next question, but the essays, I think the common theme between all of the essays that I've seen that I've been just really impressed by is that I've never seen anything like it before. And it doesn't have to be some experience that's, I don't know, super crazy or expensive or anything like that, but just, I think that uniqueness is an important piece. I mean, someone once gave me the advice that if you left your Common App essay on the street and like a friend or a parent came by and picked it up, they would like immediately know it was you. And so it should kind of have that personal feel. Hillary, what would you add for this one?
Sure. So, I mean, it's hard enough to start to even identify what story you'd like to tell. And just to kind of pick up on Mel, what you said, and Emma, what you just shared is, it's not necessarily that it has to be the most unique thing that's ever possibly happened to you. It could be something that happened to you or something you experienced, but you're really putting meaning behind it, and you're telling the reader why it matters and how it connects to your life experiences overall, and hopefully, touching on at some point, some elements, and it doesn't have to be all of these things, but, if you're deciding to tell a story, it should connect to something that has to do with any one of the following. It could be your values, your identity, your unique life experience, some of your ambitions, your personality, just how you reacted in a moment, that might be different than how someone else reacted. So it's figuring out how to tell a story. You're in high school, and a lot of the same things have happened to a lot of high school students. But if you can tell the story in a way that really does show your personality and put some why behind it, like why, let the reader know why you're choosing to tell this particular story, and hopefully how it connects to some of the things that you have done or want to do. I think that's the piece. Like when I read a first draft of any essay, I get a lot of story and not as much of the sort of connecting to why they're telling this story, what skills they've developed, and where they've applied those skills. So that's a journey for in the writing process overall. It's totally normal to start there, and then kind of we work through refining the essay and answering lots of questions about, wow, why are you telling that story, to get those really important details into the story itself. And Emma, like you said, that's how if someone picked it up, that's how they would know it was you that wrote it, instead of someone that's just telling a story that could have happened to lots of different people. So yeah, my thoughts there.
No, I love it. And Devery, anything you would add here?
Yeah, so I would just say, the kind of the purpose of the personal statement is to get to know you, right? So like the purpose isn't to expand on your academic interests, or really just kind of, reiterate or write about your extracurriculars again, without really adding new information. So admissions officers are really trying to get to know you. For the most part, most colleges in the US practice holistic admissions. So they're looking, of course, at academics, but they're also really looking at your extracurriculars and your personal qualities. And your personal qualities, they'll see that through your recommendation letters, they'll see it possibly in an interview, but they're really going to get a sense of your personal qualities in your personal statement. So this essay should add new information. It should humanize your application, right? They should get a sense of you, of some of your characteristics, your values, some, really important life experiences. But it should be truly your authentic voice. It should add something new to the application that the admissions officers aren't going to get from somewhere else. And there should be some type of takeaway from it. So, most admissions officers are going to, meet in committee to make admissions decisions. So, they might say, oh, yep, Mel, she sounds really, really friendly. She's got great grades. She wants to study, STEM. Here's her extracurriculars. And from her essay, I get a sense that she is a really awesome friend. I get a sense that she deeply, deeply cares about people. And she gives us these great examples of this project she worked on, kind of her, mentality on, wanting to pay it forward in the future, and all these other things, right? So you give that admissions officer something to hold on to and something they can present so that they feel like they can truly imagine you in their community as, someone's a roommate in the future, as a student, and that they, that you're going to add, that they can see that you'll add value to the community overall.
Yeah, and I really liked your point on humanizing the application, because it's funny you mentioned like someone's roommate, because my freshman roommate, one thing she said about her Common App essay is, in terms of the type of candidate she was, I wouldn't say like cookie cutter, but it was, she had great grades, she had great extracurriculars, she was like in a lot of leadership positions, so all really good things. But she said that she brought her Common App essay to her counselor, and it was kind of reiterating some of the same things. And her counselor really pushed her to be more vulnerable in her essay. And so what she ended up talking about was how she ran for this position called like California State Governor and lost, and like all of the lessons she learned from that. And so I think sometimes it's counterintuitive in saying, oh, should I mention that? Maybe I don't want them to know that I lost, because they won't think, they won't think I'm as accomplished. But especially if you have, you know, your accomplishments and your extracurriculars are going to speak for themselves. So are your academic performance. So I do think, especially for those types of applicants, it is good to push yourself a little bit on like the humanizing aspect of it. So for the last question, or I think we have one more after this, but in terms of how it's seen on the other end, I know both Mel and Devery, you've read applications. So how are they evaluated, and what are some of the things that maybe someone who hasn't been on the AdCom side wouldn't expect or like know about coming into it?
Well, I think, part of it is what I just, kind of jumped the gun and was talking about. So, really trying to get a sense of a student's personal qualities, really trying to, imagine them on campus and say, is this person going to be a good roommate, a good classmate, a good, a good lab partner, and so on. Admissions officers are building community. Yes, they are building, classrooms of students, but they're truly building community. They care deeply about students who are going to be active in extracurriculars, be great students, but also be great roommates, be great alums in the future. So they're really just trying to get a sense of what's important to the student. What else have we learned about them here? Like, do we get a sense of their authentic voice? Can we just like really get a sense for who they are? And do they know who they are? Right. And so that's kind of what we're talking about with this reflection and this introspective, this introspection piece, is that it's really important for students to know what's important to them, to, just reflect on what they care about, how they define themselves, because the more they do that, and the more in touch they are with, with those values, the easier this essay will be to write. But mostly it's new info, authentic voice, humanizing the app, and hopefully, coming out of it saying, yeah, this is a student I would love to have on campus. This is a student who I think would be a great tour guide, who would be, a student I would want to work in the admissions office.
A couple of things that I'll add. Just baseline, whenever I was reading personal essays, the first thing I would look for is, did they put the correct institution in the essay, or did they copy and paste it from another school? And also, did they spell check before they submitted this essay, or were they rushing through it? So just like bare bones, those were always the first things that I would look for. To piggyback off of what Devery was saying, definitely in terms of that voice and knowing, does the student know who they are and what it is about the university that they're excited about? I think she had mentioned earlier kind of the chance to expand on, okay, we read all about these, test scores, and we read through the resume. Now we really get to know even more about this student through the essay. Something else I'll say, and I'll give credit to one of my former NYU colleagues for this example. Something that I think is very interesting is that oftentimes the personal essay is utilized to talk about someone who has really impacted the applicant, which is great. It's awesome to see that you have mentors and role models and great, people that are in your life. However, make sure that we are still learning about you, because if your application is all about your grandma and how incredible she is, they might want to, admit your grandma, but they don't really know anything more about you after reading that essay. So again, really going back to that voice and really looking at this as this is an opportunity for you to share even more with the admissions committee.
Awesome. Yeah, those are really, really helpful pieces of feedback. And so before we wrap up, I also want to ask, what are some examples of the best personal essays that you guys have seen? And what in particular made them stand out from others, as you all have seen hundreds or maybe even thousands of essays? So for this one, I'll go to Devery.
Yeah. All right. So some standout essays. So I've read well over 25,000 essays at this point, as an admissions officer, as a counselor. So I've seen quite a few. And we were actually talking about, kind of about this before, that it's sometimes it's challenging to just remember the specifics of them, because, it worked in the moment and overall you got a lot from the student and you really learned a ton about them, but you don't always remember everything they wrote because it flowed and it helped add new information. But there are definitely some that really stick with you, and they're not all, they're not all about like overcoming a challenge. They're not all, about your, something, a very unique hobby that you have or anything. They really do vary. And the subject matter itself is really honestly unimportant. It's about how the student makes it about themselves and helps the admissions officers get to know them. So I'll tell you about two very different essays that stood out to me, and both of these students were admitted to Harvard when I was an admissions officer there, and they were my cases. One student was a young woman who, kind of the gist of the essay was she talked about how she was learning how to be herself, was learning not to really care about what other people thought about her in like social situations, and not caring if she made a fool of herself, right? Because she was confident in who she was. And so she like gave us this example of how she learned how to dance awkwardly at concerts, no matter who's watching, because it feels good. She's listening to the music, she's having a great time. And of course, it was about that process. We also learned a little bit about her musical taste and her friendships and, a number of other things in that essay. But it was really honest and it was really relatable, I think, in a lot of ways, where you're like, yeah, like I've definitely felt, a little insecure. And she's really kind of hitting home here. So like really stood out. Like it seems kind of unremarkable, dancing awkwardly, but it really resonated with me. And it's one that really sticks with me to this day. So you have that example, right? So nothing, no huge challenge there, just kind of getting to know her. And I've read, essays from students who've been through like really challenging life situations. A student who was undocumented and didn't know they were undocumented until they were 16 and trying to get their license, and all the challenges that came with that, and incredibly touching, incredibly difficult, kind of upbringing. But it wasn't about just the struggle. It was about, how they were getting through it. It was about how they were making the most of their situation and learning a lot about their character along the way. So you can have a very serious topic. You can have something that's super lighthearted. It's really about, is it your voice? Are you playing up your strengths? Are you telling us something new again? But yeah, I've read kind of everything in between as well. But those are the two that really stuck with me.
Yeah, and I like the point about how it doesn't have to be a huge challenge or a huge moment. One of the essays that I think about a lot is a student who I worked with who wrote about his parents finding a Wingstop receipt in the dryer when they were doing laundry. And the story, how that kind of connects to his story, is that he's Hindu and his parents were discovering that like he wasn't fully following that tradition, and he was sort of grappling with, what beliefs do I take with me from my parents and how do I kind of think about that? And then the other essays that I think are really unique, just if any of you guys are in the brainstorming phase, is when you can take two disparate aspects of your story or your personality and kind of find a uniting theme for those. And the one that I'm thinking of is someone I know at Stanford who's from basically kind of like three things that he hit on in his essay were, one, he's from a really rural part of the country. He's into debate and communication, and he's also interested in STEM. And so how those things that are all very different came together was he talked about how he once was shooting a rocket for a science project in a cornfield because he's from Nebraska, and had to learn how to communicate science to someone who maybe like doesn't have the same level of education. And so kind of like either finding a moment or finding things of like, what is something I haven't touched on that I really want to unite with this theme, or tell them something. Like with the Wingstop example, you wouldn't have gotten that from his activities list. So anyways, those are a couple of things to think about here. And I'm noticing in the chat that we're getting a lot of questions on supplemental essays. So I know, Hillary, that's an area that you mentioned that you've thought a lot about. What do you have to add there on how folks should generally approach those essays?
Sure. So I'll kind of come back to, I think, the first thing I said about really wanting to have a clear sense of all of the different elements of who you are and what you want to convey to colleges and to people who are reading your applications. And, in figuring out, kind of thinking about it as, you have lots of opportunities to tell your story. You have lots of components of the application. And it's all of these little puzzle pieces that kind of come together that hopefully are showing this full, clear picture of who you are and reflecting a lot of different facets of your personality and elements of your life experiences. And so knowing, first of all, like just kind of having a list of, or having like a bunch of sketches and ideas of what you would like to convey, especially for the ones that are really asking you to talk about yourself and your identity and your perspectives. Those are a lot of questions I'm seeing recently. To kind of think about definitely what you want to say and start to plug it in. And I'll say just there was a conversation about brainstorming. If you're a little bit stuck on brainstorming topics for your main personal essay, it can make sense to press pause on that and get into some of those supplemental essay questions and see if there's some sparks of inspiration there and a story that you might want to, you thought it'd be hard to write, and then you sit down to write it, and all of a sudden it's flowing, and you realize that that's actually the story that you would like to tell. And just kind of, one exercise I do just as part of this kind of gathering of information and reflection is when students are doing some of the drafting of how they would like to present their extracurricular activities, I like to do some reflection questions for those as well that really start to identify, sort of why you did that activity, what it meant to you, if you've made an impact somewhere, what skills did you already have that you used in that activity, what skills did you not have and then you developed, and then where else, those kind of connections across, like what Emma was saying, several disparate areas, but maybe there is some overlap in terms of either skill development or value or things of that nature. So, so again, it's kind of like starting with actually knowing what you want to share. And there's lots of different ways to do it. And I did see a lot of extracurricular activities questions pop up in there, and hopefully Mel and Devery can chat about that as well. But just knowing, what you want to convey, using those supplemental essay questions to also assess your fit with the school. And this is something that comes up with my work with students very, very frequently, is they'll say like, this school's my #1 choice, but I hate their supplements. I just, I don't read for pleasure. And that's a question that they have on, as one of their supplemental essay questions. And to actually, use that as a component of identifying and understanding fit. Like if you're really struggling to answer the questions for a particular college because they might not, resonate with you, or you simply haven't had some of the experiences that they're asking for, it is time to kind of, connect with your advisors and counselors and yourself to think about whether or not this school really is the best fit for you. So those supplemental questions are amazing and can be used in lots and lots of different ways, to identify, to share what you want to share, but also just really help are you applying to the places that are going to be that great fit for you? Yeah,
for sure. Those are all really helpful and tactical tips. And so it also led us in really well to the next question, which is on the activity section. And so Mel, what are your thoughts here? How do you prep applicants when they're prepping this list of activities?
Absolutely. One thing that I noticed, I am not originally from Texas. So when I moved to Austin and was reading applications from a lot of students within the state of Texas, and I know we have a lot of Texans on this call, so y'all might know what I'm talking about, but I noticed that there were a lot of organizations that were being put on the resume that I had no idea what they were. I grew up in Kansas, and we did not have a lot of the same organizations and whatnot that I was seeing for the UT Austin applicants. And so especially for students that are applying to schools out of state, even it's a good practice, even if you're applying to schools in state as well, to really describe, and not that you need to write a whole, page about each organization, but to go into some detail about the different organizations and opportunities that you've been involved with. I would also say from there, really being able to share tangible information. Numbers really stick out, especially when, again, folks, that are reading applications are reading hundreds and thousands of applications every single review cycle. So putting in maybe specific numbers of how many hours that you served in this specific role or organization, the number of people that you supported, the number of goals that you reached, really finding those tangible numbers that you can place in there will help it stand out as well.
For sure. No, that's a really good point, I think. And to your earlier point on really describing those activities, I think what someone once gave me the advice of is, let's say that I'm listing student government and orchestra. They're probably going to have an idea what that entails at most schools. And that's maybe especially where those numbers can differentiate your impact versus the general role. But yeah, especially acronyms too, whether that's in your essays or that's in your extracurricular section, definitely a good point there. Another question that I think we get a lot at Leland from applicants is, let's say that my grades aren't perfect and that maybe I have a lower SAT or ACT score than the average applicant, or I know this year some schools are still giving the option not to submit it. What advice would you give to those types of applicants on standing out? And Hillary, if you wouldn't mind addressing this one.
Sure. So I think, so that right now, so many schools, and I think it probably will remain this way for the most part, are test optional, with a large number of schools becoming test blind as well. And, I think, from my experience, and I think Mel and Devery can speak to this as well, is that, schools really have been able to gather a lot of information and all the other components of their application that have a strong amount of predictive value of how you're going to be able to do throughout the 4 years of your college experience. And so the SAT and ACT perhaps doesn't necessarily have, it has some predictive value and use in the process to some extent, but colleges really, especially during the pandemic realized that, and have known this for a long time, there's lots of different ways to understand who a student is, what their potential and capacity is for learning, what their ambitions are, and how they're going to really fit into a particular academic and intellectual and learning environment. So I think the first thing is just to really understand all of the different options for reporting test scores and understand how test preparation fits into your life overall. And there can definitely be a way through this without reporting exam scores. If you are really sure to make clear sort of who you are as a learner and who you are as a person. So there's a lot of opportunities in the application to be able to do that. With respect to grades in particular, a transcript tells one element of the story, and there is an opportunity, especially within the Common application, to share some additional information that provides context for the transcript. So, there might be a lot of students who have a B on their transcript. There might be students who have a B or a C or just any particular grade on a transcript that once, if you're able to, and there's space to do this, to share sort of the understanding of how things in your life affected your learning at a particular moment in time, or even your learning in a particular class. So I think the key word here that you've heard us all say a few times is context. So just providing context wherever you can. And, you want to be sure not to kind of, blame. If there was a situation outside of your control, you want to just explain sort of, the facts of the situation and, just talk about what you learned from the situation, what it means moving forward. And that's really, individual by individual, but there is often that way to provide context, which, if the admissions reader has that context, then it becomes just a component of what they're understanding about you instead of something that could be potentially, an issue or a concern with your application overall.
Awesome. And yeah, you actually hit on the next section too. And so I think, or question. And so I think for the sake of time, we'll move on to this one and we'll go maybe starting from Devery, then Mel, then Hillary. If you guys could share one final piece of advice for the students or parents in the audience as they think about preparing a standout college application.
Yeah, so I say so much of it comes down to research and that personal reflection. So you can have a dream school, but you don't want your dream schools to just be the Ivies, right? You really need to be thoughtful about why each school is a good fit for you. Again, why you're going to thrive there in, academic and social aspects. Why is this a place that you want to be? And so you really need to be able to pinpoint it. And it has to go beyond rank. It has to go beyond name on its own, right? So you really need to think about all these other factors, because once you start to do that, then you're going to realize there are other schools out there that also have the metrics, the factors that you're looking for are going to be the right environment for you, and perhaps also have a higher acceptance rate than some of the other schools. So I think it's about kind of being flexible as you go into the research process. It's about really kind of digging into what is going to be the best fit for you, and ultimately making sure that when you do apply to all your colleges, that you're excited about each of them. Like, you shouldn't apply to a college just because it's a safety, right? You need to be able to envision yourself at each school that you apply to, because that means you've done your research. There are things you can point to, and you can, you'll be excited to be there, and that's going to come across in your application. So be thoughtful about why you're even applying to the school, and definitely look beyond rank and name.
I'm glad I'm going after Devery, because I think mine is a good follow-up from that. But on top of the research, and this is again coming from someone who has worked with campus visits for years and years, but I would encourage y'all to visit campus. And I saw the list of dream schools that y'all have, and it might not be easy to just jump on a flight and go to California or go to Texas or wherever and go to your school that you're applying to. that's okay, because especially now, because of COVID and the transition to the virtual space, you can visit any school that you're interested in virtually as well. And what I would really encourage y'all to do is utilize people at the university, and specifically the tour guides and the student ambassadors. And again, I'm saying this as someone who has supervised those students. They love it when prospective students reach out and have thoughtful follow-up questions. So if you have different questions, or maybe there was a student organization that you learned about on your virtual tour and you want to learn more about that, they are there to help you and to support you. And they love that university so much, and they want to make sure that you love it as well. So I would encourage y'all to utilize them, and utilize that as a part of your research as well that Devery was talking about.
All right. So, I mean, we've talked so much about so many of the components, and all, so many of the tips that I would have loved to share here have been touched on really beautifully by everybody on the panel. And I'll just kind of come back to something that Devery just said, which is, making sure to go beyond this idea of rank and prestige. And one of the ways that I love to support students in actually doing that is, instead of focusing on a lot of ranks and other things like this, focus on how to get into a school, or how selective it is to try and get into a place. And they don't necessarily spend a lot of time focusing on what students are actually doing while they are students at the school, and then what they do after. So just a little kind of, I guess, one tip is just look at outcomes, look at what students do right while they're in the community itself, and use that to help understand fit for you and understand why it's a dream school for you. And then look at what students go on to do, and think about that as it connects to, your values and the life that you would love to create for yourself.
Yeah, no, all such good points. And just one thing I'll add quickly there. One thing that just tactical thing that I did in high school was reaching out to students who went to my high school who are now at that college, because they can just give you a lot more context and ideas for what you might connect with than you're going to find. I mean, internet searches and research are a necessary and important part, but I think that's something that almost anyone can do. And so, yeah, just to wrap us up, I think want to give a huge thank you to our 3 panelists who give such insightful and thoughtful advice. And I would encourage all of you to reach out to them individually. And if you were excited about some of the things they said and think that it could be a good fit to work with them, use your Leland discount code and book an intro call, because they're really all world-class coaches and have had so much success with other students who are either preparing or in the process of applying to their dream schools. Just 2 other quick plugs is we have more free events coming up. So one is going to be a college essay workshop, and the next is going to be an SAT prep class. And so again, both of these are free events and are going to be very high value. So I would encourage all of you to register there. And sort of what I hit on earlier, I know there's a lot of things that you guys are all thinking about, especially if you're in the midst of application season, even with the fact that Leland has a lot of offerings and a lot of different coaches. But I would say the best place to start is scheduling a strategy call with one of our team members. And so you can do that by scanning the QR code on the screen, and someone from the Leland team will sort of help guide you towards what the right next step could be. We also have a current scholarship opportunity for both undergrad and high school students. So check out our website for more information on that, but super easy submission. So I would also recommend doing that. But yeah, that's it for tonight. Thank you all so much for joining, for your participation in the chat. And yeah, let us know if there's anything that we can do to help you all on your journey towards getting into your dream college. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.